Hey guys, I thought I would take you on a tour of my rig as it stands. Now, this rig is really catered to my needs in the studio at the moment. So with all of this space, I had a lot of flexibility to take it apart and reconfigure it. And it definitely does fulfill my needs here in the studio. But some of these things may not necessarily be practical in a home environment where you've got a little bit less space. But anyway, the thing that's most striking about this rig, I think, is the monitor configuration. So the monitor stand is shaped like an S rather than a C. And by that I mean those monitors, they don't have anything supporting them directly underneath. So it's inherently a bit of an unstable setup, but I'll show you how I sorted that out, but also why I did it. So I have a formula rig, and these rigs are hard enough to get in and out of at the best of times. So we've got the monitor sort of getting in the way, and I just didn't want the feet of the monitor stand to also get in the way as well. So the way that I've managed to stabilize it is I've actually added here 20 kilos of weightlifting weights. And on the other side, for a little bit of flair, this is actually a twin plate clutch that was on my Evo 9 a few years ago now. And it's actually pretty worn. You can see the sort of thrust springs there have that groove worn into them. But the anodized aluminium clutch cover looks pretty schmick. So I thought that was a pretty cool cosmetic touch. And if we have a look here, we can see the 3D printed wheel supports. And you probably spotted by now, with the 3D printer, I'm obsessed with getting my logo on everything. So that's just a little bit of fun that I've been having with my rig. Now over here is my 3D printed dual articulating keyboard support. And I used to have a track racer keyboard tray, but it wasn't really practical because it was angled, and that was unergonomic for my wrist. And also I would drop the mouse all the time, and that was really frustrating. It didn't really happen when I used a corded mouse because it would just dangle there. But with these wireless mice that are really quite useful for other things, they do also fall away, drop batteries, and so on. So the dual articulating mount is a file that I made from scratch, and it is available for download. So hop onto my website and see if you like it. Now, if we have a look at the monitors, I have the Asus bezel-free kit installed, which is really great for racing, but for productivity, I don't know if you can see, but it creates this hologram. And whenever I'm making adjustments down the bottom here, so the, I forget, is it when things minimize to the tray? Or even when I'm just trying to click on the start button, it makes it pretty difficult to use. So for a rig that you're using for productivity, look, it can be done, but you do definitely go a little bit cross-eyed with that. Now, if we have a look in here, we can actually see for the cable management that I have these little clips that just slide into the T-slots and help to manage the cables. And you'll see that there's just a ton of 3D printed stuff on the rig. And this shelf, which supports the computer, it's MDF, and you can see that I've gone to the trouble of just cutting it around the brackets and the screws, and it actually bolts into the profile there as well. And that just gives a little bit more real estate. You can just bolt on a plain rectangular bit of shelf, but I thought the little cutouts just sort of gave it a little bit more of a personal touch. So all of the hardware, if I can get my gimbal to follow, is all on the shelf here. And so in terms of cable management, we can see I've got the power bricks up the top here, all the AC cables, all into a power board, and that all runs into one UPS, and that is actually wired up to a power supply up on the ceiling. So that means that it just doesn't get in the way of my walking around the rig, because I am someone that will definitely trip over power cables if I don't do that. Oh, and I haven't shut the drawer, so you can see all of my stuff in the cupboard there. So one of the things that was important is that I'm always taking the monitors and the rig apart from each other to fit new things or to try out new concepts. And so it had to be very easy and quick to take apart. So to actually take these apart, we can see that the monitor is actually right between the wheelbase and the steering wheel. So what we'll need to do is we'll take off the steering wheel, we'll take off this headrest, and the rig is connected to the computer with just two cables. So we have a USB cable for data and a mains cable that goes into the UPS for power. So let's go ahead and just disconnect the rig and we'll have a look at the rig itself. All right, so here's the rig itself. Now, you probably saw how hard it was for me to move that monitor stand. Turns out having 30 kilos of ballast does make it pretty difficult to move. So still undecided about what I want to do with that, but for the time being, it does stay mostly out of the way when I'm trying to get in and out of the rig. But let's have a look at the rig itself. So one thing that was quite interesting to me was that I ended up actually angling the whole rig upwards, because I had my seating position, my steering wheel, my pedals all locked in. But when I watched videos of myself racing, I realized that I was still pretty upright, and I thought everything's dialed in. It would probably be easiest if I just angled the whole rig upwards to get my feet up a little bit. And again, this is a bit experimental. I still haven't decided how I feel about it, but overall it works pretty well. All right, so let's talk about the connection to the computer. So we know that there's just the one USB and power cable. So we've got the power board here individually switched, and previously I had that on a bit of MDF, but I've actually gone ahead and 3D printed a bracket that holds it in position. So that's just a little bit more neat and tidy. Now we have a powered USB hub in here, and actually I don't think anything I run needs the power at the moment. All I've got in there is my DD1, the wireless key for my keyboard and mouse, and also the V&M shifter. Now you'll notice that there is the kickboard here that's actually got the USB hub on there. The reason I had that is because with my feet right here and the wheelbase right up above it, those cable connections are potentially at risk of getting kicked and damaged. And so I just put the bit of MDF across there, so if I do kick anything, it's actually the wooden board. A little plus is that it's a little shelf for holding my peripherals. And if I were to add any accessories to this rig, and in particular, I'm thinking bass shakers, which I had on my previous rig and just never got around to fitting onto this one. Again, we've got USB, we've got mains power. We'll probably put the amp right on this side here. And that won't complicate any of the wiring to the rig because the rig is pretty much self-contained. All right. Oh yeah, I also wanted to touch on the fact that the rig is on casters again. So if you watch my first video, I talk about why I actually have the rig on rubber feet rather than casters, because the rubber feet are a bit more steady. But the trade-off is that it's really hard to move around. I mean, this whole rig weighs about 60 kilos. But with the casters, just unlock those feet, roll it around, nice and easy. All right, so let's talk about the DD1. So we know that there's the shaft support bracket from my previous video. Again, logos all over the place. Now, the DD1 also has the power brick down the back here. Now, this is actually with a 3D printed bracket that's not my own design. And one of the things I find with printing off-the-shelf designs is that sometimes they're just not really to your specification or your standard. So you'll see that the power brick itself has radiused corners, but this design, which I downloaded from Thingiverse, has straight up rectangular ones. And the fit's not perfect, but it's good enough that it does the job, and that I probably have higher priorities than redesigning a support bracket for that power supply. But it's one of those little things that irks me, and I'll go through my process for designing functional parts with the 3D printer in an upcoming video. Anyhow, you'll see that I have these little cable management clips, and again, you'll not be surprised to see my logo on them. And those are designed to just tuck cables into the channels, just keep them there. So I've got a ton of those just sort of all over the rig as well. On the topic of 3D printed stuff and the DD1, so that giant logo on the left there, that is not just decorative, that's actually my DD1 kill switch. So this is actually my power button, and the kill switch itself is underneath that red bit there. So that was inspired by the missile switch covers, and I figured I've got a little red bit on my logo already, why don't I use that for my kill switch? So that was a little fun design quirk. Now the V&M shifter, it's mostly supported by these two aluminium brackets underneath, but again, 3D printed mount. And the reason I actually went with 3D printed mount, if you watch my long-term review with the V&M shifter, I actually used off-the-shelf steel brackets, but that was with my old seat. And speaking of the seat, this is from a Volkswagen Golf, and it's been repurposed, mounted at an angle for that Formula seating position. But because of how wide that seat is, it actually stopped my V&M shifter from mounting with standard brackets. And I figured since I had the 3D printer, I'd go ahead and design something. And again, that took actually quite a few design iterations before I had something that I was happy with. So again, we'll go through the process of designing in an upcoming video. I have a set of Fanatec V3 pedals, and these pedals, I would say they're definitely really good value. For the price, you get a lot of pedal. And people complain about some aspects of it, like the pedal spacing adjustability is 0, unless you want to avoid your warranty. And in terms of software, they're missing a few key features like pedal curve calibration and such. Now, I would love to sample some higher end pedals, but the truth is, the sky's the limit with how much you spend on pedals. And for 500 odd Australian dollars, those are pretty solid. So I've been pretty happy with those, but I would love to see what difference higher end pedals make, because I'm someone who was quite happy to just make the most of pretty good equipment. You know, it might not be excellent by today's standards, but definitely try to make the most of it. And I feel like I've got a pretty good groove with those pedals. Let's see, what else is there on this rig to talk about? I think I've pretty much covered it all. Yeah, well, thanks for watching so far, guys. I have been tweaking this rig endlessly for the last 2 years, and I'm sure there's more for me to make changes on, which you'll no doubt see as my channel produces a bit more content. But I kind of feel like it's pretty much at that mythical finished state. We'll obviously see how I'm proven wrong in a matter of days, I'm sure, because that's what we do. We tweak our rigs, we upgrade. Oh gosh, God forbid, I hope I don't break anything, but we all know that does happen too. But yeah, thanks so much for watching, guys. I always love producing stuff. I love interacting with you. Make sure you leave a comment. If you're not subscribed, please do, because as the numbers go up, you know, I reach a wider audience, and we can all have a conversation about what we love about sim racing. And that's really what I'm here to do, to talk about my passion. All right, enough from me. Stay tuned. More videos coming really soon. Thanks, guys.